Hi everyone, we have Hidde with us today. Hidde, why not you introduce yourself and then we can take it from there.
Hey Zell, it's so awesome to be here. I am Hidde. I am an accessibility specialist, someone who is nerdy about accessibility, trying to get all those details right. I'm excited about teaching stuff, which is what I do at my day job as well, at Sanity. .io, which is a content platform, CMS type of thing. We'll probably talk about that too. I have a blog as well, which is a Hidde blog. And I'm kind of passionate about sort of sharing stuff online, learning in public, and trying to, just get a community going online of people who have personal websites and blog about the web and life and everything in between, basically. I'm based out of Rotterdam, the Netherlands, by the way. And yeah, let's go.
So what's on my mind right now is that I have like two directions of questions that we can talk about. Like the first one would be to talk about accessibility, because there's something that I suddenly feel a pain for when I was writing learn JavaScript a long time ago. So there was a section that contained accessibility information and how it links to JavaScript, and I researched a little bit into the area roles and found some the standards were not being implemented and stuff like that. So that is a conversation, but for now, I want to bring it back into what I have on my mind right now, which is about Sanity. Like, how is Sanity? So like Sanity is it's sort of like a content management system where you can put data into it, and then you can, as a front-end developer, query the data, like request for the data, and then be able to build the front end any way you want it to, instead of using like WordPress as your content management system. So you don't have to be stuck with that. So what's on my mind is, how is Sanity different from other systems like Contentful, which is probably the other biggest player inside this field?
Yeah, so I think one of the things you said in your description is like you can build your front end any way you want. I think that's a really exciting part of Sanity. That's something that you need, like when you want high quality websites, like websites that are accessible, you need full control over your markup. It's also what you need if you want to get creative, like not have your CMS kind of dictate how you can do things. One of the reasons I wanted to join Sanity is that like in the last 10 years or so, I work with a lot of companies that have CMS problems, basically. Like I would come in as a front-end developer and say, hey, can we move this div around? And like, nah, that's 2 weeks of work because our CMS can't like output that. I think this is why like people love headless CMSs, or especially like developer types love it, front-end developers, because we realize that it is really important to have like that control over how stuff is outputted on the front end, especially as front ends get more complicated and we have more different channels that we build front ends for, like responsive websites, but also like websites that work across lots of different devices. So you want to have full control. One of the things that we really like at Sanity is to have full control as a developer over what you're doing, and we do that through code. So central to kind of using Sanity is the idea of making content models. So basically coming up with a structure for your content rather than for your website. So you decide like on this website, I'm going to have pets and they are going to be categorized by color or by this or by that. So you kind of describe what does your content looks like. And then you can use that for a website. But with the same token, you could also use it for like if you wanted to publish books about your pets, you could kind of do the same because you kind of grab the same data. So we're really big on structured content and trying to make sure you have a structure that you can then interact with and have easy ways to do that. So you can do like GraphQL, grab your content in a shape you want it. We have our own query language as well, which is called Grok. We don't really care which of the two you want to use. Grok is a bit simpler. I found kind of trying to use it, but some people are really big on GraphQL, and that's fine too. Like those are just ways that you can interact with that. Yeah, I think one of the bigger differences with Sanity and a system like Contentful is that you do everything in code. So like a model of your content, like if you're describing what an object looks like and how you shape your content, that's something you do in code. So like in a JSON file, which means if you want to do a project that is just like the previous one, you could copy the JSON file or grab a snippet from somewhere and get yourself started. In lots of other headless CMSs, you kind of need to go and do that through their interface, which is nice at the first time, but it could get annoying when you have to do a lot of modeling.
Wow. So I didn't have that understanding that that Sanity uses a model, a JSON file for a model, and then Contentful doesn't. So this is something new for me. The Sanity has a CMS as well, like an interface for people to log in, especially what I'm thinking about as a use case right now is, say, for example, I create a blog and then maybe a client of mine does not like to use their code editor, and then maybe they want to, like have a bit more handholding, like a graphical user interface, like a GUI, like a website.
Yeah.
Use, like, I think Sanity has it, right? And
we do, yeah, and that's I think something we care a lot about too. Like there has to be a good separation between concerns. Like you don't, I mean, it's nice for a developer to have everything in your text editor. It's not so nice for a content person, right? They might not want to do that. So we want to make it easy for developers to do what they want to do in code, but at the same time, make it really easy for content people to do what they want to do in a content editor. So yes, we have that. What's unique about it is that it can be customized, and people do that a lot. It's actually one of the fun parts of having joined a company and seeing it from the inside, is that I get to see a lot of different people's editing environments. So we have a lot of different clients that have their environment kind of work for them. Like one example is internationalization. Like we have like a big music streaming company that uses Sanity for their documentation. So that exists in a lot of different languages. So they have kind of organized that around those languages and have lots of things that they've come up with to make that easier. But we also have like a multinational like groceries company. If you go to a supermarket, there's lots of products that they make. And they have also an internationalization strategy that's completely different from the music streaming company. So both of them have like tens of different languages, like 30 or something. But the way that they edit it is completely different. They've made it so that it works with their organization. Like very specifically for like some of them want to organize by language, so have like a list of languages and then start adding content. Maybe because they have a team for each language or something like that. And others might want to organize it by topic or by product category, and then have within each product some kind of internationalization tab where you can do stuff by language. So kind of the way that you organize or display your content, especially if you have a huge amount of content, that's something that we try to enable, and we're still figuring that out, like how can we kind of make that easier? But we try and make it as customizable as we can, while also bringing good defaults so that people don't end up in a mess. Like we want to make it easy to do the editing, basically.
So it sounds to me like right now the use case is more towards like a bigger organization, but it is also applicable to a smaller one, right?
Yeah, I have a photo blog that I've built that uses Sanity just to kind of upload photos. Yeah, it is a bit of both, like because you can do all that customization and adapt everything for the way that your content people work. That's nice, especially if you have lots of content people. My photo blog is just myself, and maybe some people will look at it. I don't even know. I don't have tracking on that. So it also works for like super small small things. I played around a bit with like having the web mentions that are on my personal blog and putting them into Sanity, because I've started to get used to the query language. So I thought maybe I can like query the web mentions for this post that are older than so many days, or like that kind of queries. So maybe I should put them into Sanity. So like, yeah, you can have these like really specific use cases that you can use just for yourself as like a developer for your own blog. But it's also used by some really big companies to solve their big problems. What you sometimes see with these enterprise CMS is that they're like really complex. So if you would use them for your blog, it would feel like overkill. And that's not really the case with Sanity, because you kind of add as many building blocks as you want or as few, right? Some bigger teams might want a lot more in their interface, and others might, like the small company, might not need that.
One thing that is up in my head right now is, how do you link? Tell us about your photo blogging experience with Sanity, and I think the static site generator you're using was Eleventy, right? So like how do you think of Eleventy, and how, like, what's the process you use to photo blog, and like uploading photos and all that stuff?
So for me, a big thing was like, I'm traveling now, sort of a bit. It's still difficult, right, with the pandemic. But after having been inside, I really felt like, cool, I'm going out. I'm going to take photos of things that are outside of my own city or my own street. I wanted a place for that, and I have been on Instagram like years ago, but I feel like, that's Facebook, and I want to have my own thing all about the indie web. So I want to have a place where I can do that. I also worry about, like, is it going to be easy enough for me to update it? Because if I'm at some place and I see something interesting or funny, I want to take a photo of that. That's really easy. Like, I guess all of us do that all the time, right? Take photos of stuff. And I wanted to make the step to like put that on my own website to be as small as possible. Like, I didn't want to have to like email the photos to myself or like do something really complex. So I kind of wanted it to work on my phone and have some way that it kind of automatically deploys or like becomes visible. It should be almost as simple as like Instagram or something like that. But in itself, that's a simple-ish content structure, right? I think I have like a photo, and the photo has alt text, and I think it has a title. I played around with location a bit, and then there's a few other things that I played around with that I'm not displaying on the site right now. But that's about it. Like, that's a fairly simple content structure that I had. So I thought, oh, cool, I can do that with Eleventy, because I love Eleventy. It can turn a bunch of files into a bunch of other files, is how I like to look at it, right? In my case, I have some Eleventy sites that are basically a bunch of markdown files, and it turns that into HTML, into the HTML that I want, right? That full flexibility is there. But that would mean I would need to kind of access Git on my phone and then get that markdown file in there somewhere, and also relate the photo. And I also realized, well, I think it will be hard for these photos to actually display in the way I want to, because if you're going to look at that on a phone, maybe you don't need the big pictures, or maybe you have low data. So I kind of needed something to make the image processing thing better as well. So yeah, a whole bunch of constraints. And then I felt like I need probably some kind of CMS rather than doing Git on my phone. And I had just started working at Sanity. So it was kind of 1 and 1 is 2. I thought, I'll eat my dog food and eat my own dog food, and kind of start to use that. So what I've done is kind of set it up in Sanity. I created a project there, and basically the way Sanity works is that your data lives somewhere in the cloud, and then you can have this editor that you can edit the content with, and that's just a React app that you can put on some hosting, like you can deploy it to Netlify or something like that. Like it's a single page app that just does kind of HTTP requests to change content. Means you can run it anywhere, like you can run it locally, you can put it on a URL somewhere, and it means you can access it on the phone as well. So it's responsive and everything. So I started just taking photos, uploading them, and putting them in there. And then when they were in Sanity, my next job was to build like a front end for it. And that's what I used Eleventy for, because I was familiar with it. There is a Eleventy Sanity starter thing that exists, which made it really easy. You kind of just tell it, this is where my content lives, like this is the ID of the project, and a query. So you tell it, like, I want to grab my photos and I need them in this format, and that sort of thing. And then I deploy that on Netlify, basically. And I have some hooks set up, like when I change a photo in my content, then it's going to deploy the website again, because the Netlify or the Eleventy thing generates a static site. And that static site needs to deploy again when I have a new photo, otherwise it won't show up, right? Yeah, I could have done a single page app that just grabs the content every time you visit it, but then I couldn't optimize stuff and do the static things that I wanted to do.
Yeah, Eleventy is cool. I've been using, so what's funny is in my very first version of a blog, I was using WordPress as my CMS, right? Like we all use WordPress when we started out back in the days, 10 years ago, I think. Then what happened was I switched over to a static site generator that I built by myself. Because at that time, the major static site generators were Middleman, and I think Middleman was the biggest thing, but I did not want to learn how to use Ruby. And then the next thing that came up later was Hugo, I think it was called Hugo. And then that was built on Go, and I didn't want to learn Go. So I kind of like, all right, let me see what can I do with Gulp, because I was playing around with Gulp. And apparently, since Gulp processes a lot of files, I built I hacked up my static site generator for myself for my own blog. And I did not know that the strange thing is I've been using it for so long before the Jamstack term came around. I'm like, oh yeah, actually I'm using Jamstack.
Yeah, it's funny how you can be using something before you realize it, right?
Yeah. Then what happened was when Eleventy came around, I knew that Eleventy would be much better than whatever I could do on my own with this hacky setup. And I was getting frustrated by the slow build speeds. So I spun up my Eleventy thing for my blog, and then I just ported everything over to it. And it has been there for a while. And recently I'm playing around with Astro, because I'm like, oh, because I do a lot of JavaScript stuff, and I kind of like the JavaScript parts of it. It got to this point because I've been teaching JavaScript for a while, and then I just really like to have systems in one place, like playing around with JavaScript files, and then how to make the code a lot more concise. And Astro seems like the best fit for it right now, so I kind of move things to Astro, which is interesting because then Astro allows you to do like Svelte or Vue or React or any of the frameworks. And I'm like, oh, wow, then I can play around with all the frameworks that I want. So I'm trying to move things to Astro at this point, and I find it quite nice. Because one thing about
Which one of the frameworks did you start to use, or did you just try them all?
No,
within your Astro.
Right now, I just moved. I'm starting to figure out Astro at this point. I'm spending it on my Saturday hobby project, which is something I'm trying to launch at the same time, where we come together to do a project for ourselves that is like a hobby project that's not related to work or any other things, because like you have so much stress on the other stuff, right? So like once a week, I come to work on whatever I want to work on for 1.5 hours, and that is my project. Then right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to do that, get the page set up right, get the SEO set up right, get the blogs. I don't really start with the way I start learning stuff is I don't go into I don't simply take what others have and then just start from there. So like, the most I do is take a starter block, learn how they do it, and then I'll try to reconfigure it to the way I want it to. So I'm in the process of that right now. And yeah, I'm finding it different from Eleventy, really different, like because the whole setup is different, but the concepts are somewhat the same. One of the things I love about Astro compared to Eleventy is that it has this markdown component, which is not present in Eleventy when I started. And I had to code up my own markdown tag because I use nunjucks with Eleventy. So I coded up my own markdown tag so I could do like markdown and then write markdown inside. And all my sites are markdown. Even my HTML pages, the long versions, they are in markdown. And Astro has this automatically. So I'm like, oh, I don't have to maintain that shit anymore.
Nice. Yeah, that's the right call then, I guess, right? Are you using it for your blog as well, or if you move that over?
I'm in the process of moving it over. I haven't completely moved it over. And along the way, I'm trying to change the kind of content that change the structure of the content that I'm putting up for my blog, because the one I did in the past was a standard way where, you have the file name, like all the blog posts inside a post folder, and then you have the date followed by the slug or something similar to that. So I'm changing that. I'm splitting up into the kinds of content, like for example, the conversations that we're having now, they can be grouped into one folder. Of course, this is doable with Eleventy as well. I'm just trying it out on the Astro side of things. Then like any videos that I want to create, I can put them into a videos folder. So I'm trying to not limit myself to blog posts per se, given that this year I'm just trying to be in my 22 year end review. I just want to start exploring what I really want. So that's how I'm like trying to do the things that I would like to have and just put it in there as a package. I have no idea why I'm talking about that, but
this is one of the hardest things though, right? If I'm like setting up your blog, like how do you organize things? Like I have a folder of posts, but it's like 170 or something now, and it's just maybe I should start tagging things, but then which tags do I choose? And is it going like it's a lot of responsibility to try and make some kind of useful tagging system or like organization of content?
Yeah, speaking about tagging, I am so frustrated with tagging at this point. I'm not too sure if Sanity actually helps with this, because like if you do tagging in a markdown system, you basically only have your memory to rely on, because you can create tags and then like, oh, this is JS, and sometimes you write JS, sometimes you write JavaScript, for example, very simple version. And sometimes you go deeper into the kinds of things like async, or it will be maybe OAuth, or maybe CSS. Do you want to create a tag called CSS grid or a flexbox? How deep?
Or just do a layout one, right? For both of those. It's hard. I wonder if you could do like a plugin for VS Code that could read all the YAML that you have in your project and then suggest stuff for you, but it's probably like, oh, you've used CSS before, so it will show up in your autocomplete. But I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe where you hit the limits of using Markdown for content structure. Yeah, my manager in Sanity has written this blog post on smashing called Thoughts on Markdown, and it goes into why Markdown is amazing, but also why in some cases you want to actually use a content structure that is beyond Markdown, like move away from Markdown and do stuff in a proper content structure, so to say. Because like you say, like sometimes if your system becomes too big, then it's maybe easier to have stuff in a database and have like structure that you define beforehand. Like if blog posts have tags, then the tags are stored somewhere, and then you can kind of make that relationship between different posts. So yeah, if you do that in Sanity, you have like choose a tag and you pick it from a list, or you can like add a new tag and then that will just kind of show up. So that sort of thing is easier to manage because that's kind of what Sanity exists for, almost, like organizing content and coming up with models for your content. Like if you have tags, then yeah, that's something that you can manage. But yeah, it requires you to think about how you want to structure your content. Like in the photo blog, I had location. And first I thought I'll do a list of locations. Like I was in San Francisco, and then I can say, okay, that's going to be one location, because from there I could go to some other place that is near San Francisco. But then I still want to categorize it under San Francisco, because that's probably easier, because that was one trip or something like that. So I thought about, like, should that be one thing, or should I kind of have tags for Menlo Park, which is a place I went to, which is maybe, I don't know if it's part of San Francisco or it's like just outside of it. Like, is there a different mayor that runs the town? I don't know. Is it important? Maybe not, because in people's mental model, it might be the same area. In my mental model too, because it was the same trip. So that's the kind of thing I started thinking about. Like, do I want a drop down of locations that I pick myself, or I have photos that I upload for location data? Can't I just grab the location from that? Turns out that some phones come with privacy settings that don't actually share location data if you upload it through the browser, which is something iOS does. So you can save your location data, but when you upload it, it gets stripped off. So then you still have to email it to yourself and do it on desktop, which is the kind of thing like I mentioned before. I wanted to not do that, but I did it for testing, and it works there. And then you can, like, in Sanity, when you upload an image, you can grab the location data and expose it through your API. But I'm not going to email my photos because I didn't want to do that. But yeah, that sort of thing is talking about, like, organizing a blog and content structure. That's, yeah, it's not easy. It requires, like, sitting down and figuring out, like, what do we want our structure to be like. And that's hard for your own blog. I guess it's also hard in, like, super big organizations, right? They might have more people that are specialized in it. But yeah, you almost need, like, librarians or something to join your team.
I'm getting to a point where, because I'm still trying to create my content for async.js, which is a course I'm writing.
Yeah.
Almost done. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. And 2 more chapters left to go, and I can really fully release it. And at this point, I'm split between having to spend time writing the content versus having to, say, work on my blog or work on my business or whatever you call it, because I do this for a living. Like I write and then I sell the courses I make for a living. And at some point I look at my blog, I'm like, this is supposed to be my work, but why am I doing it in my hobby project time? But then again, it goes into a point where I guess I'm just having some problems with trying to identify what actually work means. Like if we go into the deeper end, the more emotional end, if you don't mind. And that is really about how do you define work and how do you define hobbies. And at this point, I guess I'm at a stage where I have no idea, because I'm talking about how work is related to creating content, but really work isn't just about creating content. And I'm having a split in the way I'm making decisions right now, because like I'm going into, say, for example, marketing, which is one of the more important things as an entrepreneur, as a solo developer. Then how do I market the stuff? Like I write blog posts and then that's it, end of story. Or do I do more with it? If I do more with it, I need more time. And if I spend more time there, I can't do the other stuff they want. And so it goes into this. How do I spend time as a factor, as a thing? And bringing it back into our conversation, it would be closer to, like, how do you choose how to spend time on what is work, what is not work? And to whoever who is listening to this one as well, perhaps that's a good question to start thinking about. I have no idea why I went there, but okay.
It's a really good question, which I've been spending time on too. Like, Yeah, especially since I have like children, my time is a bit more tight. Um, I used to be a freelancer, like until I joined Sanity a few months ago. I was a freelancer and kind of in charge of all of my time. Now I work full time at Sanity, but I also have side projects that I work on that are also work. Um, I'm trying to do some standards work as well. And yeah, this sort of thing is hard because you can end up like be doing your work all the time, and then do some more work on top, and you start to wonder like, is this helpful? Should I be doing this? Like in terms of like standards work, for instance, there are people who have that as their full-time job. So I spend some of my free time kind of trying to help with that if they are actually paid for it and can spend more time on it, then maybe I should spend the time on kind of doing other stuff or like going out in the nature. uh, it's tricky, like and I think for me it's also something I'm just really excited about, the web and where it goes and where it could go. um, Also through like what I've experienced in the past, like I've done a lot of accessibility reports for companies, like writing down basically where their accessibility problems are. So I have in my head kind of, this is what goes wrong on almost all the websites, and I don't want to see more of it. So I want to create content that explains like, oh, okay, this is, if you don't do this, then it helps lots of your users, so please do that. Or like create videos about that, or fix standards in a way that that sort of stuff happens automatically. um, but yeah, that's almost kind of outside of work because that's not part of my paid job, and it's never been. It was when I was writing accessibility reports, but then yeah, it's maybe also what I found interesting about doing that sort of thing, like really trying to teach people about how they could do things differently, and how that helps, like making things practical, which I think you're doing a lot of, right, with JavaScript course and your new course that's coming up. Do you, how do you decide like what to teach and what not to teach?
Well, I guess for me, the interesting thing is I don't know what my courses would contain before I
Right.
start building my courses, which may be slightly different from how other people handle it. Like
Yeah.
when I built Learn JavaScript, which is this huge monster course, I was thinking of, okay, I'm gonna show you how to build 20 components and be done with it. Simple, right? 20 stuff, like we build stuff all the time. 20 stuff should be easy peasy. And then I go into, okay, I got a lot of people who needs to know how to learn things from scratch. So I go into teaching the basics. Then after I realized that the order of the basics need to be taught in a very specific order. Otherwise, people get start getting confused. I have to restructure the content again based
Yeah.
on that feedback. So stuff like that. And then as I go around along, I go like, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And that those things eventually come. And one of the things that I am unhappy about is that sometimes it takes a lot of time for one of my courses to form. And you hear stories about how people are so freaking productive that they can get whatever stuff done in under a month or in 24
Yeah.
hours or whatever, right? And then I sit here and then my course took a freaking year and I'm still working on it. Bearing in mind that yes, I took a break for about half a year because I went into depression, and then bearing in mind that part of my time needs to be spent on other stuff like blogging, because if I don't blog, then the source of revenue actually can practically stop, that kind of stuff, or like lots of things on the end on my plate right now, and I go like, I'm so slow.
That's the thing. People don't see what your plate looks like. Right. So they see a course come out and they, you don't know what's going on. Like if someone can create a course in a month, um, maybe they have the full month available for it. Maybe they've done that in their evenings. You don't know kind of what that looks like. And there could be quality differences too, right? I mean, there's different
Yeah,
levels of how much people want to perfectionize things, if that's a word, like make things perfect versus, oh, it's fine like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I have no idea why I'm talking about all of this right now, but let's go with the flow, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and what happens was like when when we have a child, we want to spend the evenings with a child, so that part of the energy gets taken up. And
Yeah.
what is interesting is after I realized I had a child, that I can't be as energetic as I am in my work processes anymore, because spending time and spending energy with a child is actually exhausting. Like, they are
Yeah.
bubbly, and if you are present with them, the energy gets sapped away really quickly, which is not something we're used to. And that
You
is
really have like a new job. I was gonna say side project, but you really have a new full-time job basically with children, right? It's yeah, if they're around, then yeah, that's a lot of work. And that's also different between people, right? If there's a lot of childcare or not as much, and yeah, balancing these things can be really hard. And
yeah.
you want to prioritize children always, I guess, like over work
So,
if you can.
so right now what I have is, even though I'm spending the evenings with my child, and I don't really spend a lot of time with her too. So I kind of want to be with her for a while, and then I go back into working mode. Then the other thing I do is I have a lot of learning processes going on. Like, I'm almost always undergoing a course somewhere about something about related to life, and that is another part-time job. So I'm juggling three part-time jobs in one day,
Yeah.
and that saps my energy. I'm sometimes I wonder whether I should change the way I structure my life, but then I also don't want to do it because it will eventually lead to a more expanded life. The way
You
I'm
know these Silicon Valley types that say, "Oh, I wake up at 5 and then I go to the gym and then I do 10 other things and then I start my job at 8 a.m."
uh-huh.
That, I mean, it exists maybe, but yeah, it doesn't work for everyone. And I don't know, like it makes you tired probably too.
So how's your routine like if you start talking about this topic?
um, it's kind of dictated by my children, right? I mean, they wake up, I wake up. Basically, um, a friend of mine sent me a card when we got our first child, and wrote, "Congratulations on your new alarm clock." And then I read, I was like, I don't understand what he's talking about. But then, very soon after, I really understand. Like, I don't have an alarm clock anymore. I have two children, and they wake up early enough. Very rarely I wake up earlier than them, and then I will go and read the newspaper. I get a physical newspaper delivered to my house every day, which I want to read, but it's hard. It's not always easy. Let's say that because yeah, I need to also make breakfast for the kids and like get them ready for school and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, that's maybe what I start doing in the morning, like yeah, breakfast, all those sort of things, like dealing with the kids, and they go to daycare, so I might bring them there, or my wife will. And then I start working, and then sort of towards the end of the day, like 5 6 p.m. here, I'll go and pick them up, and then kind of goes back into children time. That's usually like in the daytime I have time to work, and in the evening it's usually children time. Um, Sometimes there's meetings in the evening, and then that's more messy than I've just described it. And that happens a few times a week. Like I join some standards meetings, and then that happens in my evenings. So that means like yeah, I don't bring the kids to bed. I go to the meeting instead. Um, yeah, I think that's also a time zone thing. Like a lot of that sort of stuff happens in US time zones, in US mornings usually. So I guess for you it happens in the middle of the night even, and for me it's in the evening. So yeah, some of those things are more optimized for US based people, basically. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this.
I have no idea where I'm going with this too, but okay. I got this this angst that comes up with time zones, because like most of the time zones are meant for US people, and why do I always have to sit in here in the middle of the night? I'm like, fuck the US people sometimes. And I go like,
Any US people watching? Sorry, we don't
any
mean
US
it.
people watching, I hate the time zones. And
Yeah,
that
can't
is,
we just all live on one time zone, right?
yeah, that's one of the reasons why when I create my own events, I think about time zones a lot. Like
Yeah,
I try to think about it when it comes to the Australians, what time would it be? Like in Singapore, what time would it be? In the States, what time would it be? Like East Coast and West Coast, and in London, what time would it be? And unfortunately, I come to this point of that if I'm trying to structure an event that hits as many time zones as possible,
yeah,
someone is going to be left out. Someone is going to be have to stay awake in the middle of the night. Like
yeah,
for example, if I do it like at 10 a.m. over at my time, in UK it will be 3 a.m. which
yeah,
is not really good. If I were to do it like the best time would be around like 2 p.m. But at 2 p.m. Or 3 p.m., that will be 3 a.m. on the East Coast. And then I
yeah.
lose like some of the people from the East Coast. But there's nothing much we can do about it, I guess. Like I think
No, it's basically just the way that nature works, right?
maybe I
That's
think too much about this.
yeah, but it makes sense because yeah, you are affected by time zones a lot because yeah, you're trying to make things work across them. I have this amazing app that I installed recently called Dato, which puts the different time zones in my menu bar of my Mac OS. Um, that's really helpful because I can quickly glance at it and see where my colleagues are at, if they are asleep or like waking up. Because I really find it hard to manage, having worked with teams across the globe for many years now. Like it's still not really working in my head. Still, every year when there's that week that the time zone, the summertime in the US is not the same as in Europe or maybe Asia too. It's always messy because all the meetings shift around depending on where they originate.
The
It's
PDT and the daylight savings time and the non-daylight
yeah,
savings time just messes with things.
and I never remember what the word stands for too. Like is it PT or PST or is it sometimes? Yeah, I don't.
Standard is no
Yeah,
daylight savings, which means it doesn't add a +1 thing or some shit.
right, right. Yeah,
Basic.
this is hard to get right. We built a new feature in Sanity where you can structure, like, say something that has to publish at a certain time. And I saw the messages of our developers in the Slack, like what they were dealing with, because there's a lot of assumptions you make when you say, "Oh, I want to publish this at 10 a.m. in the morning," which 10 a.m. right? What are we going to look at? Yeah, that sort of thing is hard to get right, especially if you want to build global teams. Like at the W3C, we had one team member in China and another team members in US and then in Europe. So we always someone had to be up at night or extremely early. Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. And when it comes to even systems, right? Like you're talking about Sanity. I remember the first time I was trying to do like a workflow thing. So my blog currently right now has this thing where it automatically updates depending on the days. So in the past, I would draft posts in advance and then I would just leave it there. And one day, hopefully, the correct time passes by and then the post will update that the
Wow, you're
event
brave.
gets gets what's that called built, and then
Yeah,
cron job gets done somehow, and then the thing gets updated. So yes, I have that somewhere. And then you can do that with GitHub Actions now. It's a lot easier to set it
yeah,
up. So essentially, then you have to pay attention to, because like I'm sending the content out from my side. Like maybe if I do like PST but my server is in somewhere else, and then GitHub is somewhere else, and I go like, oh shit, where is that time zone? That's bad.
yeah. I never schedule things in advance. I like the pleasure of sort of pressing the button that the thing goes live and then going and tweeting about it because I'm all excited that it's finally out after a year of deliberating on like what exactly how to do. And then I will find my spelling mistakes, right? I don't know if you have the same, like you publish your post and then it's like, oh, wait, there's a spelling mistake there, and then start editing it. This is another reason I missed my CMS, because I could do it straight in my CMS. And now I have to start a new build.
I guess I gotten to a point where I don't want to look at my blog posts when they're finished.
Yeah, that's better, probably. Yeah.
I just want to. What I do now is I have a personal blog at zellwk.live, and I do a daily blog. And what I do is after I blogged finish, I looked at it, I check the grammars, I go npm run deploy. And I go to bed. That's about 3 a.m. usually, 3 a.m. in the night. So going back into my routine, that is, I generally wake up around 9-ish or 8 plus, and then I try to start the day at 9 o'clock. Maybe do some physical exercises, do a quick shower, and get started with the day, get some work done, have lunch, end of the day, do some meditation in between because that keeps me sane. Then in the evenings around 7 to 10 is the time with my child. And at 10 p.m., my wife brings them to bed. And I continue working until, depending on what I'm working on, because either I'm going to be one of the courses I'm working through, or I'm working on my blog. So far, I'm not too sure whether I'm going to continue doing that anyway, to be honest. Then that leads into about 1, 2, 3 a.m. depending. And if I have a chat with my wife before we go to sleep, which is important, like we don't really have a lot of time. Sometimes in our chats, it lasts about 1 or 2 hours. So when we're done with the chat, it's 1 a.m. Then I sit down and start blogging.
No, yeah, that sounds like you're working really late at, I mean, middle of the night. How do you, like, do you not like take a nap in daytime or something to make up for that?
I do. So like generally people work like, say 4 hours, like 4-hour blocks, and then 4-hour blocks or something similar to that, right? In my 4-hour blocks, I have to schedule like a break in between. I got to a point where I can't really sit down and focus for 4 hours straight. I never was able to. My best focus time is around 1 hour to 1.5 hours. And when that happens, after that, I need to go and knock out for a while, like on the floor, on the bed, depending on where I go. But that's how I structure my time at this point. Like that, this is the only way I can function with all the things I'm trying to do at the same time. How do you get here?
I don't remember, but it's good to know.
Yeah, we were talking about I swung back into routines for some reason. And yeah, because I wanted to tell you about my routine because I asked about yours, right?
Yeah, and like I think, yeah, a routine is important if you have a lot of stuff that you want to do. And we were talking about work, I think, like how do you structure your work time versus life, and make sure you're not working all the time, and fit everything in that you want to do as well, that you're wanting to get done.
Oh yeah, speaking about that, what I'm noticing is that having a set structure actually helps with a lot of things. Like, for example, giving myself 1 hour to do a personal blog at the end of the day. Whether I do it in 1 hour or whether I do it in 15 minutes, that doesn't really matter. I give myself a block of time. The good thing is as you go along, you start reducing the amount of time you need on that one. I do a daily blog, so and the audience is me, so the quality varies, and it's not as intensive. But if there are some things that you can't really attach a fixed time to, like for example, if you're trying to write an article with all the technical details of things, you can't do it in 1.5 hours. Like sometimes I envy all these people who are trying to write about stuff and then they can finish their stuff, the research, and then you just have to figure out how to teach the stuff that you want to teach. And then it's harder on a technical blog because you have to make sure the code works as well. And as you go through it,
and you have to do a lot of fact checking as well, like figure out if the things you're saying actually are the case, or if that works in the browser, or maybe one of them has a bug. Oh wait, I'll file that bug actually. And yeah, you're suddenly spending a lot of time on
So
That's the thing with the personal thing. Like you say, you put in a block of time and then you just write. It reminds me of, I was listening to an interview with a newspaper columnist who like writes a column in the newspaper every day. And she was explaining that like because the newspaper goes to printing press. So at sort of 10 p.m. or something, she needs to hand in her thing, and it's got to be exactly 700 words. And she knows lots of things, and she has lots of interesting insights. But before that time, you have to come up with a subject and an angle and some kind of like fill up all the words at least, but it also has to be interesting and correct and whatever, like lots of things. But because the time is so fixed, you will end up with something just because you've set yourself that deadline, and there's an actual deadline, right? Because yeah, if you don't hand it in, I guess the newspaper will fire you at some point, right? That would be a problem. Like you don't have more time. I have thought about doing this for like my own writing, like saying, okay, I mean, I don't send it to the printers, but having a deadline, like you say, you have an hour, and that's what you use for writing. I guess it will force you, right, to have something on the page.
or rather, for me, it's not about forcing myself to do an hour. It's an hour is generally what I notice I would take. And
Okay.
um, when I started out, that was about a month ago. I forced myself to write something every day for my personal
Yeah.
blog, because the whole intent was to force a little bit more consciousness onto myself, like learn a little bit more about myself, depending on, or leave some nuggets for my future self in certain things. When I look back, I'm amazed by the things I say. To be honest, I'm amazed by myself. But at that time when I'm writing, I have this very specific process that I noticed that works. The first is to write a draft of what I want to say, which can be anything. Like I open with the title today, and then I write. And if anything else, it doesn't go as well because they will be fixated in a form. But this only works for this kind of thing, right? So I write everything I want to say, and then I choose what I want to focus on, and then rewrite it, and then I rewrite it one more time. So basically, 3 to 4 rewrites is then the post is out. Yeah, that's generally how like this kind of content can go. But if you're talking about tech content like articles, I don't think it's possible, because at some point you go like, hang on, I don't think this is correct. I have no idea. I can't do a rewrite until I figure that out. So you have to.
Yeah, there's a lot of rabbit holes, I think, when you're doing technical content. Like, oh, I've said this, but now I need to go and figure out if it's actually the right advice that I'm giving here, or
Yeah. So the one that I have on my mind as an example is I was writing on OAuth, and authentication, right? So how do you save the authentication token, the SS token? And it's either in your cookies or in the local storage, right? And then there's this big hoo-ha about whether you should use cookies or local storage, and then you have to figure out what that is. And then in that, the argument is either going to be CSRF or XSS. And I have to go and figure out what that is, and then come back with recommendations about what it actually is. And along the way, you find that people are very emotional in their defense of their choices, especially in this context. Like security experts always say, use cookies because they are more secure, and other people will say you don't have to, because the facts are that if you get XSS, you are fucked either way. So that's kind of where it is, and I go like, okay. There's an agenda going on somewhere, like when security experts are. I'm not saying that this happens to everyone, but there may be an agenda regarding security, that security is so paramount that it overrides other factors. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but
I think that's the same for accessibility sometimes, that people are strong about things. Do you ever, like, when you're writing something, worry about I can't come up with the word. Then like you will get replies from people in the sense of like you've said something and then you're like, oh, if I say it like this, then I'll probably get these replies, so I probably need to rephrase it? Or do you worry a lot about how your post could be misread or stuff like that?
One thing that is good for me so far is my posts are rather technical, so they do not
Yeah.
really misread. The posts on my personal blog are, well, you can misread it however you want. It doesn't really affect me, right? And that happens with a personal related stuff. The ones that are hardest to touch are accessibility and security, because they come down so hard on you when you're trying to be helpful, figuring things out.
Yeah.
And
I had someone rewrite a whole post of mine and say like, this is wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong. And it's like, this is not fun to be in, because it kind of assumes like, oh, you didn't cover this, so you must be like, you must have gotten it wrong. But sometimes as a writer, like you decide, I'm going to focus on this thing, right? You can't always focus on everything. So sometimes you miss someone's personal pet peeve and then they get annoyed with like, oh,
I'm on my end, I'm thinking you're very brave for being in the accessibility field. I don't want no part of it, even though I've written a little bit about accessibility inside the course itself. I don't want to release that part because there's this fear that even if I release that part, I know it's accurate because I checked the specs, I confirmed with it, I tested every single thing, tested with voiceover, tested with NVIDIA, was it NVDA, tested with every single thing I could, and I make sure that that is right, but I don't want to release it outside because the accessibility experts will definitely come down with some sort of comments that doesn't justify or doesn't acknowledge the amount of work I put into it, and they will probably shame my work somehow. So I think just don't really want to do that.
There's a lot of backlash in the accessibility world, and I think that's super unhealthy. Like a lot of accessibility people are cynical about what others are trying to do. So someone will write a blog post and they forget to mention one accessibility aspect. It's like, oh, this person doesn't understand the world and blah blah. It's just really hard, and it also works against the cause, I think, because we're trying to make the web more accessible. On the other hand, like a lot of accessibility people have experienced bad people that they worked with, like people who told them, oh no, I don't want to do accessibility, I think it's useless or not required, or some of the accessibility people have disabilities themselves and have been discriminated a lot in their life, and then it's like every time that comes up, that gets kind of emotional. But yeah, we've got to stay calm and really like just put out practical information and not be angry or cynical about this, because we're losing people otherwise, right? As accessibility specialists, we're losing our audience if we just get angry at them all the time. That doesn't work. I find it helps me that I've worked at the W3C on the accessibility stuff, that I feel a bit more confident on how these standards work, and I don't worry as much about people telling me I got it wrong, because sometimes I know I didn't get it wrong. If that makes sense. Like
you're in the standards. Hey, I'm in the standards, why I should know my stuff to be able to get in there, that kind of thing. So on my end, I'm a little bit less confident, but I know I'm getting it right because I tested everything, right? But on my end, I'm a little bit less confident because when I did that part of the course, I am completely new to accessibility. So I have no idea how to set up voiceover and stuff. I've learned everything from scratch. So that was hard. And I think around that time, I posted some article on accessibility and I got shot about it. And I also wrote a post about why I didn't like to write about accessibility a few years back.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
That was one.
Very important to say that. I mean, this should be a safe environment to write about accessibility and try to get it right. I think some people have had a lot of bad experiences in the past, and then for that reason kind of start.
Which I also on the other side of the hand, on another angle, I don't blame them because like let's say for example, there are people who are putting out really bad CSS advice, like
Yeah,
and I look at it and I go wide-eyed, but I don't say anything about it because I don't really want to judge or leave any comments on those things. I just do my own stuff.
yeah,
And if you follow me, you know what I would recommend, that kind of stuff. But if you want to listen to someone else, I think it's up to your discretion. So that is the way I handle things rather than try and poke holes in other people's arguments, because I really don't know what's going on through their heads with a tweet, for example. Like probably I'm a little bit more sensitive to communication, and that
yeah.
is why I try to not engage in this kind of conflicts. But unfortunately, like on the internet, everybody engages with this kind of conflicts a lot. So yeah, I'm not too sure where I'm going with this. Like this is like a hard conversation. Like I'm
Yeah.
going into so many places. I have no idea why I'm going to it. But so far,
Are we both speakers of English like as our second language? Are you?
uh, I would say that English is primarily my first language over here in Singapore. But we are effectively bilingual in speaking usually.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's my second or third language. I feel that sometimes makes it harder to engage in this kind of things. Like sometimes you get some nuance wrong or something,
Oh, the
and
hardest
then I
part,
don't know.
the
What's
hardest
that?
part about it for me when we talk about things is that when we say stuff, we don't the words don't actually come to us in the form that is grammatically correct or vocab like the grammar doesn't flow correctly, and it gets hard to write in short
Yeah.
sentences because we go like you go over the place before you finally get to your point.
Right.
And that is a problem with the way I'm writing sometimes. But I don't know, what's that other time. Let's see how to improve that. um yeah. And I guess what I can drive at is more towards like it doesn't really matter how others think of you, because at some point you know where you stand for yourself, you know the work that you have done, and if they want to say something bad, well, then so be it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to distinguish, right, between oh, this is someone saying something bad versus oh, I'm getting useful feedback. That's something I do love about blogging, that I've also got a lot of very useful feedback, like people who work on Aria themselves, and I've written something about it. I've made a mistake. They tell me I can fix it. The post becomes better. I learn stuff.
Yeah.
They are happy because there's more information out there. Like that sort of working together, like to kind of move it to a more positive note. I think that is actually really nice about sharing knowledge in the public. If you get useful feedback from people, like experts reaching out to make your thing better and to help you fix mistakes, awesome. I sometimes get DMs that say like, oh, if this sentence there is wrong, or you've done something there that you should do differently. I love that, like getting help from other people. Yeah, thanks for your time, right? For helping me out.
Yeah, I love that too when others tell me that something is wrong here and something that should be better, like use feedback. But when you write, like most of the stuff most of the time this won't even matter, because the people that actually comment are things on your things are people that you don't know, and their words would hold no weight. The
Yeah,
hardest times is when someone influential who knows what they're talking about actually say something that shows that they haven't actually read through the entire thing or understood your point of view. So
yeah.
in the past, I was very hurt by it, but then now I'm go like, I wonder what will happen if that kind of thing happens again. I will probably be a little bit sad, but I think I will be able to shrug it off pretty easily at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, you're growing as a blogger, right? At some point you've learned or you've experienced that a few times, and then it affects you less. At least that's how it's supposed to work, right? In life generally as
Yeah,
well.
like you get exposed to the bad stuff and you learn how to handle it. configure how to handle this kind of people. Oh, this person is not as perfect as you think they are, basically. And then they slip up as well.
Sure.
So that's how I handle it. Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea why we are going to this. Like, this is very funny. But okay. I hope someone gets some knowledge or information out of it. And the conversation.
Yes, we should be more actionable in this. Like, give some practical advice. Don't blog, or do blog, but ignore the critics.
I guess it's not really that much about the actionable advice, but it's really about the process and the like what you can notice when and what's coming up. It's like this kind of thing is in the blind spots of all the content out there. Like, people would say you should do this, you should do that, you should do that, and then they give very general advices on how to handle, say, this kind of thing that happens. But it is very conceptual based, it's very intellectually based, and I think one of the missing elements in a lot of our communication so far nowadays on the web is the emotional element. And especially as a developer, especially when I'm looking at articles and what other people are writing, I go like, there's no connection inside there except for the tech connection. So at some point, I started trying to write a little bit more about the emotion side of things. That didn't go that well to most people inside the tech blog. So I shifted it into a live blog, but I'm not too sure whether I want to continue, like I said. But what's important is also the emotions involved in the connection, because that tells a different story compared to what the do's and don'ts, the rules, or the aspects that you can say about a subject. And emotions are a language that is very hard to convey until you give it the space and the time to pull it out and form a story about it, which is why it is hard to communicate to many people unless they are also willing and open to listen.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to get right. I think like that kind of content. For tech content, you can check it against the spec and then this is good.
Yep.
There's no spec for emotion. And that's, I think it's harder. For me, I don't talk about emotion in blog posts. I try not to, because I think it exposes a lot about yourself, and I would rather do that over coffee with someone in person. Yeah, even though I think it's important, right? It's important to have that sort of content and to be open about that sort of thing. I prefer doing it over coffee, or even doing it in something like this, and having a bit of like more space to talk about things than just like the one sentence in a blog post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and at some point, I'm thinking about what would, like, is there anything that we can do to put in, say, more emotions into the creations that we have? Because like emotions are actually one element. Like, for example, you said that you're very excited in publishing the post that is finally written after a year, right? So like that emotion can be expressed somewhere, but how? So that is
Right.
That's what I've been thinking about recently. For some reason, I have no idea why. My mind goes into so many different places that I sometimes think I have ADHD, but I'm undiagnosed.
Have you ever tried to get diagnosed, or is it...
I never tried to.
No.
I don't know. I will definitely get disappointed by the results anyway if I get diagnosed as ADHD, or if I don't get diagnosed by ADHD. So what's the point?
Just like, then what was it? Yeah.
I don't really care about that. That's point. So yeah, let's wrap up. We went into a lot of tiny rabbit holes everywhere, into many different touchy subjects, which is, I think it's magical to be able to have that sort of open conversation with someone. And thank you for your time, Hidde. So just one last question would be, is there anything else two questions. First is there anything else you want to say to the audience while listening to this? And second, where can we find you?
Thinking about anything else, this is a big thing, right? What can I share? You can find me on hidde.blog, is my blog, or head at HDV on Twitter. Anything else I want to say? No, not really. Like, I think we've talked a lot. Yeah, please make personal websites, like write on your blog. I love reading from anyone, like if they're in the web field, what they're thinking about. And that's something like I care passionately about. Like I have friends that I talk about over coffee, and then when they share things with me, I feel like this should really be on a blog. Like you have all this knowledge in your head, take it out of there, put it on a blog, share it with the world, because we need more voices on there, right? There's a lot of people blogging, but they are not the only people working on the web, and it would be nice to hear from everyone else too, because yeah, I believe everyone has interesting stuff to say. So if you've ever thought about blogging but don't know if you should do it, yes, you should. Put it on your own domain and send the RSS feed to all of us for us to check out.
Yeah, that'll be nice. I agree that blogging can be magical if you blog for yourself and not blog for other people. It can be very healing in a way as well. So depending on what you want to blog about, that's all perfectly fine. It can be used for learning, for example, too, which is what I started out with. Yeah, I will say that I would love to read blogs as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Zell. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for being here, and thank you everyone for listening to the end. Bye-bye.